Hey guys, so sorry about that. Just a quick issue with sharing my screen, but I should be back live in Facebook again. So let me just have a quick look. So let me just close this one, and we should be back up and running. So let me share my screen. Let me share my screen and okay. Screen. Okay, here we go. So, hey guys. So for you guys on Facebook, as I said, if you've got any questions as you go along, just drop me a message. Similarly for you guys on Zoom, drop me a message on Zoom chat if you've got any questions. And what I'll do is I'll jump in and out and answer those as we go along. So let's get started then. So as I said, these sessions are meant to be really brief, to the point, 30 minutes. I don't want to keep you on here for hours and hours. So today we are talking about KPIs. So let me know, guys, if you can hear me okay. I will just be checking in and out every so often. So drop me a message if you're not getting through. But today we're talking about KPIs, and the title of the session today is why you need KPIs to better manage your business. So there are two sections that I really want to cover off in the next half an hour. So the first one is why we need to track KPIs, why it's so critical that we do that within our business. And then the second section is once we realize the importance of that, we then need to figure out which KPIs we want to be tracking. So let's get started on the first section then. Let me just jump in, make sure everything is okay. Great. So why do we need to track KPIs? So the first point here is, for me, this is really a key point, because as we all know, as cleaning business owners, our week tends to go up and down. We tend to have great days, we tend to have terrible days. Even within the same day, we can have great, a great hour, a great morning, and a terrible afternoon. Things can change pretty quickly. So if you are relying on your gut feel to tell you if you're having a good or bad week or a good or bad day, then this is not a good way to manage our business. We want to know explicitly, is the business performing well today? Has it performed well this week? If it hasn't performed well this week, we need to change it. We need to improve on it. And this is where KPIs can really come in, because KPIs, a KPI is a key performance indicator. It is basically a metric that allows you to better understand how your business is performing. And these KPIs, are invariably numbers or percentages, but this point here is super important. So numbers give us clarity without the emotion. And what I'm saying by that is that if we are looking at the week's performance, the week's KPIs, how many clients we've added this week, or how many cleaners we've onboarded, or what profit we've generated that week, they are cold and hard, fast numbers. That completely strips out the up and down emotional roller coaster that running a cleaning business can have. And this is really important, because we need to take the emotion out of running our business. We need to understand what's when things are good, and why things are good during those times. And if they're going badly, we need to be on top of why things are performing badly, and then try and dig down and find out and understand why. So this is why KPIs are really important. Many people don't even track any KPI. Some people don't even track their revenue on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. You'll ask them what was their revenue for last month, and did it grow on the month before, and they don't know. So revenue is a very, very basic form of a key performance indicator. So it is better to be tracking something rather than nothing, at least you can get a better idea of if the business is moving in the right direction or not. So, as I said, revenue is a basic one, but really what we want to be trying to do is use our key KPIs to quickly dig down and understand the financial performance of our business. So at a basic level, what I'm trying to say here is that, if, for example, our revenue has fallen 20% on the week. So our revenue this week is 20% less than that, last week. If we weren't tracking our weekly revenue, we probably wouldn't even know that. We'd maybe find that out, 2 or 3 weeks down the line, at which point, it's almost too late. We need to know when things are going wrong so we can act in it. But really, in this example, if we find that our revenue has fallen 20%, we need to understand why that has happened. And this is where the KPIs can really help us, because, another example of a KPI might be something like, our recurring client cancellation rate, or in other words, our churn rate. How many of our clients, our recurring clients, have cancelled service on that week. And, if we are tracking that KPI, we might find that actually, okay, the revenue has come down. And that's because 20% of our clients cancelled that week. That would be a very, very large number. But really what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the top level performance, say the revenue or the profit of the business, and get a feel of if it's moving in the right or wrong direction. And once we see that change happening, if that change is unexpected in any way, we then need to fall back on our KPIs to dig down on that data and try to understand why things are happening. And this is super important, because if we're not tracking any KPIs, we can't really understand what levers are being used in our business to improve the performance of our business, or to bring down the performance of the business. So, hopefully what I'm reiterating to you guys here is how important KPIs are. Many people don't use them, but we need to understand them, so we can better manage our business. The final point on this section is just talking about what I call leading indicators versus lagging indicators. So, a KPI is anything we define it to be. Anything that we track on a regular basis, we could define as a KPI, key performance indicator. But in my view, the very best KPIs, and the ones that we really should be focused on as cleaning business owners, is thinking about the leading indicators. So what do I mean by a leading indicator? So for example, if we find that we've had a great week because suddenly we've onboarded twice as many recurring clients as we would normally expect, that is a fantastic week. But we might not necessarily see the positive impact of all those new recurring clients until, maybe a month down the line. So, and the reason for that is obviously a new recurring client, they'll book today, but maybe their first service is next week. And if they're a weekly client, then they'll have another one after that. And then, so for a weekly client would have 4 services in a month. So we wouldn't necessarily see the huge positive impact of a new weekly client until a month down the line. It's the same with bi-weeklies, exactly the same thing. So what the KPIs, what this KPI does for us by tracking the number of new recurring clients we brought on, this gives us a leading indicator that says, okay, we would expect in a few weeks' time, we'll see an incremental benefit in our revenue, but this will add, in our monthly revenue, we'll probably expect a big jump. So this is an example of a leading indicator. Completely on the same track, if we are, if we find that a number of our clients have cancelled that week, much more than normal, then we might not see the immediate impact in next week's financial performance on next week's revenue, but certainly 4 weeks down the line, next month's revenue will see that big fall. So The reason why leading indicators are really important, because leading indicators gives us advance notice of change happening in our business. So we need to make sure we have a group of KPIs that we track regularly. And if they are leading indicators, this gives us the maximum chance of being able to pick up on any changes in the business, because it's far better for us as business owners to know that there are some big things happening negatively sooner, rather than 3 or 4 weeks down the line. We can do something about it sooner, and this is what these leading indicators allow us to do. So hopefully I've sort of reiterated to you guys how important these KPIs are. What I'm going to quickly do is just go down to into the Facebook group. If you guys got any questions, hey Caroline, hope you're well. If you've got any questions, just drop me a message in the group. And similarly on Zoom as well, just drop me a message if you've got questions, and I'll come back to that towards the end. So now that we know that KPIs are super important, what do we do next? As I said, KPIs are basically anything that we define them to be as. But what we need to do really is to try and come up with a small group of what we think are the most important KPIs in our business. And if these are leading indicators, even better. And the idea is that we only want a small handful. We don't want 10, 20, 30 KPIs, because the value of tracking KPIs is only if we track them regularly and we act on that information. So if we are got our KPIs and we are wanting to track them weekly, it means we need to update our KPIs every week. It's far easier to update a small handful than a very large number. And exactly in the same way, if we've got a small number rather than a very large number, it's easier for us to analyze the data as well. If we are finding that, okay, these, we've got 20 KPIs, these 6 are all very, very positive, but then these 4 are all negative, and there are some in between, the actual brain power that's needed to go through all of those and understand them is quite significant. So, in all likelihood, what might happen is that we might decide that we don't want to, we're not going to go through that data and update it. And that's the worst thing that we can do. So if we are, if we have a large number of KPIs, we know which are important for our business, but because there's so many of them, we don't decide to update it because there's so much work, then that's a really bad position to be in. So pick a small number of KPIs, and what I do in my own business, as many of you know, we're a 7-figure business, we're in 4 cities, so a fairly decent size. So we track our KPIs weekly, and we then look at monthly KPIs as well. So we don't do much around daily. Obviously, if we're doing daily, it'd be lots of work to update it every day. There'd probably be not a lot of data to process. So we do it weekly, and then we've got a good idea of how the business is performing. So with that in mind, what is the next step? So we know that we want a small handful, say 3 to 5 KPIs. We don't want 20. How do we find and identify these KPIs? So the way that we want to think about it, this is true for residential cleaning businesses, commercial businesses that do both, ovens, windows, carpets. It's the same approach in essence. So you want to be thinking about what the most important KPIs are, both on your client side and your cleaner side. So if we ignored one or the other, as we all know, the way that we grow our business is by increasing the number of clients, it's by increasing the number of cleaners, and they need to be going side by side to allow us to capitalize and generate revenue. If we've got all this client demand but no cleaners to do it, then the cleaner capacity restricts our growth. So we need KPIs for both the client side and the cleaner side. So as I said, we can use whichever client KPIs we want. And, for every business owner, it will be different. But these are just a few of the ones that we look at in my own business. So we look at both new leads coming in. So these are new clients, and we also look at what's happening with our existing clients. So as we all know, recurring clients is an important part of growing cleaning businesses. So we need to, make sure that we are growing the number of new clients we're onboarding. That's very important. But if we are losing lots and lots of our existing clients, maybe because there's a quality issue or some other issue, then that's going to limit our growth. So we need to be looking at the new clients coming in, as well as what our existing clients are doing. So new leads can be simply, number of new clients added that week. It can be actually new inquiries. I strongly advise you guys to track the number of phone inquiries, the number of online inquiries that you're bringing into the business. And, if we are tracking that data, which I do in my own business, we can then look at things like conversion rates. So how, what percentage of those leads, convert to actual clients. So we want to be thinking about number of new clients added, thinking about, number of new leads in the business. Once we've got the new client acquisition sorted out, we can then look at some KPIs around our existing client base. So churn rate is a very a very obvious one. So the churn rate, again, we can define it in various ways, but really it comes down to what percentage of your existing client base cancels service that month. So for example, say you had 100 recurring clients at the start of the month, and then at the end of the month. So at the beginning of March, we had 100 recurring clients, and we get to the end of March 31st, and we find that we only have 90. So we have lost 10 of our clients. So the 10 lost, 10 divided by 100 is 10%. So that means that we have a churn rate of 10%. So, when we put this together to grow our business, we need to add more than 10 recurring clients to make up for those that we have lost. So if we just simply looked at the number of clients we have at the beginning of the month and the number of new clients that we have at the end of the month, it masks these two parts. So the number of new clients added versus those existing clients that have cancelled. So this is really, the thought process you want to be going through when you're thinking about your KPIs. So there are various levels and layers to the KPI tracking as I envisage it. You've got your very top level, which could be, the profit, the revenue your business brought in that week. So if that is very, if it's been a really great week and you've had lots more revenue and you don't understand why, or you've made much less revenue and you're not sure why, that's when your KPI, the lower level KPIs can help. And this could be then a case of thinking, okay, well, why has the revenue changed? Is it a client issue? Is it a cleaner issue? Okay, it looks like to be a client issue. Okay, let's dig down further. Is it because have we had a bad week because we've had not very many new clients jump, or is it because we've had lots of clients canceling? So hopefully, I'm getting through to you guys that the idea around KPIs is that we want to understand the financial performance of our business. If something doesn't make sense at a certain level, we want to be digging down deeper. And really, we need to make sure that we are able to dig down by tracking some of these KPIs. So that is really what we're trying to do. We're trying to diagnose if there's been a big change, positive or negative, to the business, and to quickly understand why that has happened. Because if we can understand it, if it's been a great week, we know we just need to do more of that. If it's been a really bad week, we need to understand why it's been a bad week, and then we need to quickly understand that. So the longer that happens, the longer we detect, the time that we detect a problem to actually acting on it. If it's a negative, if we've had a negative week, that whole period is going to be painful to us as business owners. So this goes back to this last point here, that leading indicators are super important as well. So the client side is, one of the two areas that we want to focus on: the number of new clients coming in, the number of the existing clients have churned off, and then we bring that all together to get an idea of the total number of clients in our business. So those are examples of some client-facing KPIs. We should give exactly the same amount of focus and time on the cleaner side. So people tend to spend a lot of time on client acquisition, client marketing, number of new leads, conversion rates, cost per leads, all those sorts of things. And they almost spend more time on this rather than the cleaner side. But the cleaner side is equally as important, as I said earlier. So, again, some of these things are examples of KPIs that we track, and you might want to think about doing the same in your business as well. So again, what we as an example, the number of job offers made is something that we track in our own business. Again, this is an example of a leading indicator here. And the reason why that is that if we make a job offer and that new cleaner starts with this week, that's great. They'll have some jobs the following week, and obviously those jobs bring us additional revenue, additional profit. But really, if that cleaner is working over weekly, over a month, we probably don't see the real benefit of that new cleaner until 4 weeks down the line, or the next month. So again, the job offers made is an example of a leading indicator. We know if we are recruiting well and we've made a number of job offers, or you could say that a number of new starters, that we are going to see the benefit of that probably a month down the line. Conversely, if we know that we're struggling recruitment, we've not made any job offers, we know we're gonna pay for that further down the line, because fewer cleaners means less capacity. We can't capitalize on any new client inquiries that come in. So this obviously assumes that any new joiners stay with us for an extended period, and we all know that would be a fantastic position to be in. That's not often the case. Many of the new joiners will just not work out. Maybe they don't make their 30-day probation period, or those sorts of things. But all things being equal, if I know when I'm running my business and I'm running my cleaner recruitment KPIs, I know if we're not making 5 job offers a week, that is a bad week for us. And I know that further down the line that we will pay for that as a business, because related to this first thing is the churn rate. So you can have exactly the same idea around churn rate for your cleaners. So, if you had 20 cleaners, how many cleaners do leave in an average month? So, if it's one cleaner, 1 divided by 20, that's 5%. So we know that in exactly the same way as we're thinking about the clients, the new clients and the existing, if we know that we're losing one cleaner a week, one cleaner a month for various reasons, maybe they're moving out of town, or maybe they've decided to get another job, we know we need to replace that cleaner that we've left, as well as additional cleaners to continue growing our business. So in exactly the same way that we think of the clients, the total number of clients as the number of new ones versus those that have cancelled, we need to think in exactly the same way with our cleaners, the number of new cleaners that we bring into the business versus those existing cleaners that leave the business. And what you'll find is, as your business gets larger, as you're getting to the multiple 6-figure and 7-figure level, the churn rate, both of these become really important. If you've got 300-400 recurring clients, if you've got 30-40 cleaners like we have, this churn rate is really important. And if you've got a very large churn rate, that is going to really hamper your business. So churn rate becomes a more important KPI as your business gets larger. And then this is just another one, KPI that we track. We track client ratings very closely. So after every job, a client gives us a rating out of 5, and we just convert that to a percentage. So we need to be thinking, if our client rating has really dropped off, say it's generally we're at 90% plus. If it drops down to say 80% plus, that again is a leading indicator, because that is telling us our clients aren't happy. A percentage of those will probably want to cancel, and we know that we won't see the direct financial impact probably until 3 or 4 weeks down the line if they are recurring client cleaners. So again, this is an example of another leading indicator. So hopefully I've really drilled that down for you guys. KPIs, super important. The next step, let's not try and pick too many KPIs, because we want to be making it easy to update these. We want to be making it easy and relatively, quick to update them weekly, monthly, and then to be analyzing the data. We don't want 20 to be going through. Far too much information to process, far too much information to update as well. So once we've got that small handful, then as cleaning business owners, then we look at the client side and the cleaner side. These are the two most important bits. And as I said, when we boil it down, it's pretty simple. We want to be thinking of number of new clients added versus those existing clients that have left, number of new cleaners that we brought on versus those that have left. And at a very basic level, this is what we want to be thinking about: which KPIs gives us leading indicators to give us a good idea of how both these sides are performing. So that's the client side, that's the cleaner side. The final point here is really linked to, when we start to, put goals in place for our business. If we have objectives for our business, if we, for example, want to double the revenue in our business in a year, we can use KPIs to help us reverse engineer the actions that we need to take. So reverse engineering, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, is basically saying, okay, we want to double the revenue in our business. At a very basic level, that means we probably need to double the number of clients, double the number of cleaners. Okay, so if we need to double the cleaners and clients, then we can then look at our KPIs to understand what we need to do. So we can look at things like, okay, well, if we are generating, 15 leads a week, then, how many leads do we need to be generating to get, double the number of clients? Is it 25? Is it 30? We can double the number of clients by improving the lead volume. We can also do it by improving the churn rate. If we improve both, we'll probably get a magnified impact. But again, we need to think about the cleaner side. So we can be doing some great work on the client side, making great progress on marketing, getting new leads and the churn rate. But if we're not making any progress on recruitment or making sure our existing cleaner base is happy, then the cleaner capacity is going to limit our growth. So if we want to double the revenue in our business, we need to make improvements for both these sides. And KPIs allows us to dig down and more clearly tell us what we need to do, what actions we need to take. If we want to double the number of cleaners, how many job offers do we need to be making a week? If we're making 5 at the moment, does it mean that we need to make 10 job offers? Or maybe we only need to be making 7 job offers, but we need to improve our churn rate. Maybe we need to improve the employee engagement. Maybe we need to do things like cleaner of the month, or show them more love, give them more feedback, improve our training so that the number of cleaners leaving every month actually reduces. So the KPIs allows us to more easily hit our goals as well. And this is what the idea of reverse engineering is. So half an hour's up, guys. I hope that's been helpful. We've obviously covered a fair amount of material here. As I said, hopefully, even if you start tracking only revenue on a weekly basis, you're probably ahead of, I would say, 50% of your competition. As I said, many people I speak to don't even know what their revenue is on a weekly basis, or profit on a weekly, monthly basis. So start at least somewhere, and try to use the numbers to remove the emotions of the up and down of being a cleaning business owner, as we all know. Once you have one, then try and pick out a few more. Try and think about the client side, the cleaner side. We don't need to go into huge amounts of detail. As I said, it's better to track 2 KPIs or 3 KPIs than none at all. So even if you only pick up 1 KPI, say the total number of clients that you have each week, that's better than not tracking it. Same thing with a cleaner. How many interviews have we done this week, or how many job offers we've made? Even having one for each will help. And once you get that in place, what you'll find is that, you know, you will really just be much more meticulous about how you run your business. You will have a lot more advance notice of how your business is performing, and if things are going wrong, you'll be straight on there quickly. If things are going really, really well, you'll more quickly understand why it's going well, and you can do more of that. And really what this boils down to is that, you know, it will help you better manage your business, but it will also accelerate the growth of your business. So I hope that has been helpful for you guys. I will just very quickly just jump into Facebook and Zoom just to see if we've got any questions. It looks like we're okay. As I said, you know, this is a live, but if you guys watching on the recording have any questions, again, just drop me a message and I can come back to you on that side. So hopefully you found that helpful. You know, do like it. You know, if you're got any questions, do drop me a comment. You know, this really helps me to find out if you guys are finding this type of stuff helpful. So like it, drop me a comment, and if you're watching it on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, and you'll be notified of future coaching sessions as well. So this is something that we obviously go into a lot more depth in my coaching program, the 7-Figure Cleaning Academy. And you know, what I'll do is I'll drop you a link with the you know, some further information about the program. And you know, as I said, if you guys have got questions, you can just contact me through the usual channels. So anyway, we will I will leave it at that. Hopefully you found that helpful, guys. But otherwise, have a great rest of the Wednesday and great rest of the week. And I will see you next week. Thanks, guys. Take care.